Hello and welcome to Until Saturday, the Athletics College Football Podcast. I'm David Ubben with Chris Vannini and Damien Harris. The first ever 12-team playoff has been set. Guys, we are live. And guys, these 16 weeks flew by. Dame, what did you make of it?
I mean, this was the most unpredictable up and down season that we've ever seen. And it was because strictly the expansion. I know people talk a lot about NIL, transfer portal. The 12-team playoff opened up so many different doors. You know, there's conversations about how flawed the system is. Obviously, we're going to sit here. We're going to dive into the SMU versus Alabama debate. Like, there's so many things that have been turned upside down. And it's like, we've said this before, this is the first time they've ever done it. So we just have to see how it plays out. Now that we have the final rankings and we see these matchups, there's going to be a lot of exciting games, but there's still a lot of questions that people are going to have. There's a lot of things that people want to get answered. And there's going to be a lot of chatter for a long time about what the decisions were, how it all came about, who fit where, who got left out. And I mean, that's the beauty of the sport. That's the beauty of the game of football. It's just you never know. And you got to be able to be comfortable with the unknown. And, you know, whatever your fate is, you just got to roll with it.
I love it. I think this is great. This is an awesome bracket. I think the matchups are really fun. Everybody's path is really interesting. SMU being the last team in, I think was the right call. It fit with what they did in the bracket. I'm fired up, man. Like, all this talk about 12-team playoff, what's it going to mean for the regular season? What's it going to mean for conference championships? It has been an awesome season with unpredictable, awesome results. And now we're going to have a playoff where, like, I could pick like half this field to win the national championship. Like, you really could. It does feel wide open. I'm fired up and ready to talk about it.
On today's loaded show, we got thoughts, takes about the 12-team playoff. We're going to share our reaction to a full slate of conference championship games. Did Cam Skattebo just run his way to New York City? Is Ashton Jeanty going to run away with the Heisman? And what about Carson Beck? How do we view Georgia in light of his injury? I was in Atlanta last night. Chris, you were in Dallas for the Big 12, and Dame, there's some reports of possible crowd surfing for you in Indianapolis last night at the Big Ten.
Yeah. You know, it's so funny. It's so funny because I picked Oregon to cover that game, and I let the Penn State fans know about it, particularly the student section. But, just wanting to see a great game and taking myself away from having to make a pick, just being in the environment and being right there behind the student section. Like, it was an electric environment. My first conference championship as, a member of the media, and I was just grateful that the Penn State fans didn't try to throw me on the field or try to rough me up too much for ruffling some feathers. But, yeah, we all had a good time last night.
Yeah. And before we wrap today's show, Ralph Russo is going to join us to recap our CFP Bracket Challenge. How'd we do in predicting the playoff field? Me, Ralph, and Damien put our projections up before the first rankings even come out. We'll see how those stack up. And of our nearly 1,000 participants, which 3 scored the highest and won themselves a year-long subscription or extension to The Athletic. Stay tuned for that. But let's start with the playoff bracket. Let's just run it down. Oregon gets the 1 seed. I am just looking at this. I'm excited. Can we fast forward 2 weeks? Oregon gets the 1 seed. They will play the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. Congratulations, Oregon. You went undefeated. You have easily the toughest second round matchup, I would say, where there's no option there. Those are 2 really good teams.
Also, that's Tennessee playing at Ohio State, by the way. And
that is correct. Yes, Tennessee will go to Columbus. I will be at that game. The 2 seed, Georgia, they will play the winner of Notre Dame and Indiana. Indiana will be traveling to South Bend. Also in Indiana, if you didn't know that, that's going to be fantastic. It's kind of sort of a weird interstate rivalry that's not really a rivalry. Boise State gets the bye. I thought it was awesome that the OG Giant Killer Broncos get a bye in the first 12-team playoff. They will play the winner of Penn State, and SMU gets in over Alabama at the 11 seed. I was a little surprised they stayed ahead of Clemson, but they will be the 11 seed there.
I will be there.
Travel to Happy Valley.
Be there.
Chris will be there.
College.
Yes, and Arizona State holds off Clemson in the rankings to get the 4th bye. They will play the winner of Texas and Clemson. Clemson and Cade Klubnik, Austin native. He's really tight with Drew Brees. He will be in his hometown of Austin playing against Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Guys, I think my first big takeaway when you look at this bracket is the committee did what they said they were going to do. They teed it up. I don't know how long ago it was, a month ago. It was a while ago. Ward Manuel said, we're not going to unduly punish conference title game losers. And what did they do? SMU is in. They went to that game, played in that game, were not kicked out of the bracket while Alabama was home. Texas plays a game. They won the SEC outright, unbalanced schedule, all that stuff, but they won the SEC in the regular season. They play in that game. They lose a tight one in overtime. They're given the 5 seed, despite the fact that I'm not sure their resume is better than those teams that they play, that they're above. And they get a great path. They get to play a Clemson team that SMU was the first good team that Clemson's beaten all year. And then if they advance in that game, they will get Arizona State. Texas will probably be at least a touchdown favorite in both of those games before they get to the semifinals if they can win their way there. That's a pretty nice little path. And I think that jumps out to me as the biggest thing that the committee, for all the criticism and for all of the raised eyebrows, for them to get to this point. And we have conference championship weekend, and they don't penalize those teams is really something.
Yeah, that was the big question coming in. Like, what do? You have these teams that play extra games. It's different than the 4-team field. Yes, Georgia was number 1 last year, got knocked out of the field for losing. USC a couple years ago, number 4, knocked out for losing. That was a 4-team field. It was you were being compared to different teams. And outside of the top 4, it didn't totally matter where you were. This is the first time that where all of those teams placed was really what mattered. When I saw Texas come up at 5 and Penn State come up at 6, that was when I was like, I think SMU's in. I think at that point they have to be, because if you follow that consistency, they're not hurting the conference championship game losers. So credit to the committee. They stayed consistent with that. People are going to complain about all sorts of things, but you want consistency, and that's what we got there.
I'm really curious if the committee, how much of it, I mean, it rolls over. I'd have to think, there's 8 or 9 people on the committee this year that were on the committee last year. Is that about right, Chris? They rotate like 3 or 4 people a year.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm really curious how much the weight of all the blowback of last year of putting Florida State out despite going undefeated did weigh on them this year, because you're faced with kind of a similar situation here, okay? You're not talking about injuries, but you have a conference title game loser. You have an SMU team that doesn't necessarily have the wins, but you've said you weren't going to punish conference title game losers. You have the opportunity to pick Bama and send the ACC into a off-season long existential crisis, and you don't do that. Dame, what did you make of the committee's decision? Obviously, you played at Bama. You're very familiar with that program. I think the arguments are pretty standard at this point. SMU doesn't have better wins. They have obviously much better losses. Bama has much better wins, but has 2 losses to 6-6 teams, including a 21-point loss to Oklahoma. What did you make of that committee's decision?
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think they did that just to avoid the criticism that they faced all offseason, all the speculation of if they're going to get it right this year. And that's why they left Alabama out. We all know that Alabama is, and I'm not saying this is right, wrong, or indifferent. Alabama is the bigger brand. It's going to attract more money. It's going to draw more viewership. That's just the nature of the business. But at the same time, they did set the precedent that they're not going to punish conference championship losers. Do I think that's fair? I'm not really sure, because there's a lot of talk about getting rid of conference championships. So if we're going to get rid of the championships, and that's the chatter saying that these championships games don't matter, then why do we not view that conference championship just like another game? If you lose, then you should be viewed and, I guess, evaluated the same as those other 8-9 teams that are at the bottom of the rankings. So I'm not really sure what to make of it. Like, I have an opinion. I personally think that Alabama should have gotten in. And this is coming from a former Alabama player that said Alabama wasn't a playoff team. But when I look at how everything is viewed and how everything is evaluated, they have better wins. Yes, they didn't play for a conference championship. They beat the number 2 team in the country. They beat the SEC champions. They've got better wins. Yes, I know they got some embarrassing losses, but we've even talked about the committee views big wins. That's more important than having ugly losses. And even when I look back at the rankings a couple of weeks ago, whenever Georgia and Tennessee were ranked higher than one loss, Indiana and who's the other one, and SMU at the time, like that kind of set a precedent that you play maybe in a tougher conference, you're playing a tougher schedule, so you get the nod. But then Alabama doesn't get that just because they didn't make it to a conference championship. It's just like it's like drawing hairs. Like it's so fine lined and it's so subjective. But at the same time, there's no real answer to it. And it's up to those people who sit in that room to make a decision. It doesn't matter what my opinion is, what your opinion, Chris. It doesn't matter what anybody says other than those people in the room in Grapevine.
I do think
I disagree. I think our opinions matter. I think they're the most important opinions that are
agree.
going on.
I do think it's interesting. I thought SMU should have been in, but I think the Alabama argument is interesting because if you want to take the cynical view a little bit of this decision, I do think you're right, Damien, that it does point to some inconsistency because throughout the committee's history, wins have mattered a lot more. They haven't really cared who you lost to. I think that who you lose to should matter. I think especially if you're comparing a 3-loss team to a 2-loss team, I think who you lose to should matter. And obviously Bama has 2 horrific losses there, especially the Oklahoma loss.
Yeah. And
they have much, much better wins, including one over the SEC champion in Georgia. But I think that's where you get into a weird discussion because then it comes down to what is the value of a conference championship game, because it wouldn't have really been close if, as Rhett Lashley said last week, SMU had all caught COVID and mysteriously couldn't play in the ACC championship game. I don't know, Chris, what did you make of that discussion and how much merit do you think there is to the idea that it should have been
Bama? None. So here, actually, real quick, here's a fun live reaction from Molly McGrath, who's at the Clemson watch party. She says, during Clemson's watch party, the loudest cheer of the day wasn't for their own ranking or matchup, but for SMU's inclusion in the playoff, which I think is pretty cool. I thought it was pretty cool that Dabo was stumbling.
Here's a question.
What's cool about that? Hold on, Chris. Hold on. Yeah. What's cool about that? What's cool about that? Because
he's sticking up for his because Clemson is currently suing to get out of the ACC, and yet they're cheerful that the team that they voted against, voted against SMU joining the conference, and they're happy that they made the playoffs.
If I put on my tinfoil hat, how much of that is ACC solidarity, and how much of that is here's a middle finger to Bama? That Bama's
that's why I'm saying what is cool about that. They were happy because another ACC team got in. They were happy because Bama didn't get in. Just like the rest of the college football world who aren't Alabama fans. Like Chris, don't do this, Chris. Don't sit here and act like this is an ACC pack. It's not that. I know Fran Brown and Dabo Swinney are patting each other's asses and kissing each other's forehead.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanking each other. Cool. That's cool? Fine. But that's not what this was. This isn't what this was about. This was about everybody collectively, you included, Dabo Swinney and Clemson included, finally being able to say the committee did not put Alabama in. We're tired of them. We don't want to see them anymore. We've seen them in the 14 playoff. And it's still the same narrative, clearly, because everybody's just happy that Alabama didn't get it.
So here's where it was just different this year. Normally, neither of these teams would have been in the 14 playoff mix, and so it wasn't a comparison to be made. SMU was already 3 or 4 spots ahead of Alabama. You can make the conference, the strength of schedule argument, but it would have been made a while ago. It's the fact that you're playing an extra game. Do you penalize them for that not happening? This is why I think it was different than Florida State last year too, because Florida State and Alabama played on the same day. The new Florida State and Alabama. Alabama went and beat number 1 Georgia, while Florida State didn't look great without Jordan Travis. And so there was a clear comparison here. We didn't have that this year. Alabama was sitting at home. SMU was playing. The final data points we got at the end were a bit different for the committee. I know a lot of people compared it to FSU. That's why I think it was different, because of what we got the last day.
Yeah. I did want to hit on, we were talking about conference championships and how much they should or shouldn't matter. Chris was threatening to fight me on Twitter last night.
Let's do it.
To me, it doesn't make sense to make your 2 best teams play a 13th game. And we saw it last night. Carson Beck gets hurt. We'll see what the elbow injury is. Kirby Smart, I think they're probably going to play at Coy for competitive reasons heading into their quarterfinal game in a couple weeks. It didn't look good. The second I saw the replay and the hit, I thought, if you were going to suffer a serious elbow injury, that's exactly how you would do it. And it looked really, really bad. And how much of it is gamesmanship, bringing him in on the last play to hand the ball off? He clearly didn't. If you watch the replay, he's tucked in. He doesn't want any torque on that elbow. It's a very tentative handoff. Now, we don't have to have the discussion because Georgia earned the automatic bid by winning that game. But I do think that, again, if you're the SEC, you don't get Alabama in, and you ask your champion now possibly to play a game without its starting quarterback. And even if he is ready for that game, he's probably not going to be 100%. Saturday, I still think the conference championship stuff doesn't really make sense. SMU has to sweat this out where they never would have. Chris, explain to me why you think that Championship Saturday still needs to exist in the way that it does for now and not be evolved into something else. Our colleague Manny Navarro had a really good idea, which I will hit on after this.
The funny thing is, Conference Championship weekend was great and important and really cool.
The games were awesome.
For everybody but the SEC. And yet it's the SEC more than anybody else who wants to keep that conference championship game. But I don't know how you can look at the football we had for the last 2 days. Boise, UNLV. I'm at Arizona State, Iowa State, which is a play-in game. You've got SMU playing for the life. You've got Clemson has to make a 56-yard field goal or else they may not be going to the playoff. We had Penn State and Oregon throwing haymakers. Like, it was an awesome day of football. We had some early blowouts. The second half of the games were really fun. You could tell conference championships and winning those games matters. I think conference championships are still a really big deal. I think all those teams, coaches, and players think the conference championship is a really big deal. And if you take away the conference championship and what it really means, you're basically getting rid of conferences at that point, and you're turning it into the NCAA basketball tournament, which is all that matters, is what this means for getting into the tournament and going from there. And I don't want to get to that point. I want conference championships to still mean something in college football, but because conferences are too big, you can't just go by wacky tiebreakers and overall standings. I thought this was a fantastic, awesome, fun, successful weekend of college football. You just happened to be at the game that mattered the least.
Chris, we're already at this point. This is the issue. Okay, Oregon wins the Big Ten. Congratulations. If they crap out in round one and lose, they play Texas, right? If they crap out, or no, they play the winner of
Ohio State. Tennessee, Ohio State.
Yeah, they play the winner of Tennessee, Ohio State. If they lose in their very first game, no one's going to care that we're already there. The conference championships, even though people want to say they mean something, we're already there. People want to think that they mean what they meant previously. They don't. This season.
Did you see Oregon fans last night?
I know.
I was waiting to cut in for that point, because
go ahead.
The speech and the passion that I saw in Dan Lanning's eyes when he held up that Big Ten championship trophy, you can't tell me that conference championships don't matter. You can't tell me that this is not paramount to what the foundation of college football is. I don't care about expanding the playoffs. That does not diminish the importance of winning your conference, competing week in and week out, trying to be like SMU. You try to be the undefeated team in your conference, play for the conference championship, and win and solidify yourself as the best team in that conference. Like, you saw it at Oregon, Penn State. Like, it is there. It's still very much alive. I really cannot fathom a world without conference championships.
I still think
I don't want the whole thing. I don't want the playoff to be the entire part of the sport. That's the thing.
Yeah,
we're already there. Yeah. That's my point. We're already there. Ultimately, I think people will see that they don't matter as much as they mean in the moment. And when you look back at a season, real quick, before we get into the games themselves, Manny Navarro had a pretty interesting idea in that you rebrand them as like play-in games, because they're not going to give up the money. The events are going to be there. But I think if you could say, hey, we're going to go down the standings and you can opt in to improve your seeding or chase the bye or not. If you're banged up, you say, we want to get healthy, we'll see that. And that's an interesting idea, because if you're SMU, obviously they would opt out. If you want to play, you can play. And maybe you take a team vote, you figure that out. If you feel like you have something to play for, then check yes on the box, strap it up, and let's go. If you don't want to risk your playoff inclusion, then have it be. I think that is a super, super interesting idea. We are going to get into the games, but real quick, let's get a quick national championship pick before we get into it. Looking at the bracket. Dame, I'll give you the first crack at it. Yep. Who do you like to come out of this bracket? We won't go through every game, but just who's your pick?
Yeah, and I'm with Chris. I could really point a finger at half of this field and say I'd be confident. But being at the Big Ten championship last night and watching Oregon in person, something about it was different than watching them on TV. Like, they looked crisp, they looked sharp, they looked fundamentally sound. They moved the ball when they needed to on offense. They made good stops on defense when they needed to. I truly think Dylan Gabriel he's climbing the ladder as one of the top quarterbacks in college football this season. Obviously, I know he's got all the records and he's done all that college football has to offer. But just talking about this season, like, he is playing better and better and better. Even through the conference championship, he's just getting better and better. He's got all the weapons. Dan Lanning is one of the best coaches in college football. So if I had to, which I don't want to, but if I had to make a pick, I would have to go Oregon.
Okay. Chris, what do you got?
I think I think Oregon is the best team in the field. Although I do have questions about their defense and especially their run defense, which has not been great at times. But I look at the bracket and you're like
I know where I'm going. You're going to like it, Chris.
Georgia's got a great path, but is Carson Beck going to play? Penn State's got a good path, but can you trust Penn State? Texas has a good path, but Quinn Ewers hasn't been very good for a while now. And then Oregon has the toughest matchup. I'm going to go Oregon just because I think they're the best team. But again, I don't feel very confident in that pick. That's why this playoff is going to be a heck of a lot of fun.
I'm going to take Texas, and I think they're going to play Georgia again and win. And Chris, your split national championship possibility is super, super interesting to me. I think if you look at the matchups, I think Texas bludgeons Clemson. I think they can lock down Cam Skattebo. They have the secondary and the big dudes up front to slow down Oregon if they play them in the semis. And then I think they probably see Georgia, and I think that's where we're headed for that situation in the bracket. Guys,
good pick. It's a good pick. It's a fair point. That makes a lot of sense. I got to say though, I watched Cam Skattebo against Iowa State on Saturday. I was at that game. I'd never seen him in person. This dude is unbelievable. I love this kid.
The Punisher. I love it. Before we move on to our conference championship reactions, a couple programming notes to share. Our typical Monday, Wednesday, Thursday show schedule is going to change because of the playoffs. So make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel and Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to until Saturday so that you can be notified when we publish new episodes. We're going to up the number of shows we publish each week to 4 through the playoffs. On Tuesday and Thursday this week, we're going to be publishing the first of our playoff previews. And on Saturday, we're going to start our 2024 season exit interviews, beginning with Florida State. Manny Navarro is going to help contextualize the Seminoles' historically bad season, Mike Norvell's coordinator changes, the program's trajectory, and more. If you haven't had a chance to read Matt Baker and Bruce Feldman's story about kind of what went wrong at Florida State and what happened from behind the scenes, was super, super interesting. So again, be sure you're following us on your podcast platform of choice. YouTube, our social handles, all those places to be notified when our episodes go live in your feeds. Let's get to the game. We're going to start in Atlanta, where I was. Kirby Smart said it, not to beat a dead horse, but he said he didn't feel like the juice was the same that it has been. And in the building, you could feel it. Once the game started, because the game was so awesome and the drama was there, the fact that the stakes were not necessarily also there, where you've had so many winner-take-all games with Georgia and Alabama in that building previously. But the game was awesome. And I think ultimately it is defined by Carson Beck's injury and Gunnar Stockton coming off the bench, playing the way that he did. I think Texas was a little bit unprepared for them as a running quarterback. And they looked, you could see Georgia did not trust him to do a whole lot. They weren't letting him cut it loose. He throws that horrific pick that should have gone to the house on a play that he tried to throw the ball away. But ultimately, they ran a lot of quick screens to the outside, a lot of quarterback draw. And Georgia, they absolutely pushed around Texas's front. They missed Kelvin Banks a lot. Left tackle. He was out there in pregame, tried to go, didn't really work. I did want to ask you, Dame, did you see the interception late in the Texas game?
So I missed it. I missed it just because I was
Did you see
traveling
the clip,
over to yeah, but I saw the clip. I didn't see it live, but I saw the clip. And
you got to keep it positive on the sidelines.
Yeah.
But if you are, I didn't see the guy that was not throwing the block for Jeanty Barron. If you're celebrating and you miss a block that does not give you a easy pick six, what should have been, what is the actual conversation when the coaches, when you're back at your apartment later that night, the actual conversation from the guys that are not
he's pissed. And he definitely went out to the sideline and was like, bro, you really screwed me right there. I had that happen before. Obviously it wasn't on a pick or anything. I had a chance for a 60-yard touchdown run one time in the league when I was in New England. N'Keal Harry didn't block the corner. Marlon Humphrey ended up, chasing me down, making the tackle. And literally the first thing, we didn't even get to the sideline. He came back to the huddle. He's like, bro, I got to buy you dinner. I got to buy you dinner. I got to get you a drink. I got to do something, bro, because I messed up. But it's just the play is not over until it's over. Play until the end of the whistle. That is literally that right there could have been the difference in Texas winning this game versus losing. That one play, that's how critical all of these plays are. And I know we're talking about this one in general, but I want to get off script a little bit and just talk about it. That's why all of these plays are so important, because it's only one play. You can always look at one play in a game where you lose 22-19 and be like, if we had done better on that one play, we would have won the game. And if it's something that comes down to a guy celebrating instead of just throwing a block to get his guy in the end zone. Like, if I'm Sark, I'm pissed. I'm not gonna lie. Like, as a head coach, I don't even know how you handle a situation like that, because like that's not even something that you fundamentally teach people at this level. Like, that's not something that should be coached. Like, you should know if somebody's got the ball, go find somebody to block. I was perplexed.
I was in the Texas post game and somebody asked Jeanty Barron about it. I forgot what he said, but he basically was just like, yeah, you got to keep playing. Like, it was, I forgot. I wish I remember exactly what he said, because I didn't really write about it.
Sounds guilty to me.
Yeah, it was. 6 sacks for Georgia, 15 tackles for loss. They were penetrating quite a bit. Texas' offensive line, maybe slightly better than the game in Austin, but not much. A lot less trash on the field, though. Chris, that was good. Chris, what did you take away from that SEC matchup?
So the first half happened while I was writing after Big 12. The second half, I basically just listened to it on the radio on the way in and kind of watch clips afterward. But I think big picture, like if you're Texas, you're up at halftime and you knock Carson Beck out of the game and you still lose. Yeah. That's tough, man. That is just on the whole a real bad look. And yet, they're only down to number 5. We thought coming out of Texas A&M, we're like, look, Texas is running the ball better than they ever have, even without Kelvin Banks, the star left tackle. How can they do it against Georgia this time after getting demolished in the trenches? The answer was no. Georgia completely stuffed the run again for them. Quinn Ewers couldn't get anything going. Texas also, left a lot of points out on the field. You missed 2 field goals. You're not finishing drives. The problem the first time was that Texas had horrible field position the first time they played. They could never make up for it. This time they couldn't finish drives. So you go 0 for 2 against Georgia, 2 different losses. But I again have questions now, Texas moving forward. Can they run the ball in the playoff, or are you going to just have to rely on Quinn Ewers' arm to win you the game? Because I don't know if that can win you the games.
Yeah. Chris, you were at the Big 12 championship, or as I like to call it, the Cam Skattebo Heisman exhibition.
You mean the Neo concert?
Excuse me. Yes, I did see a little bit of the Neo stuff. Who doesn't love 2008? Hey, shout out to it.
It was good, man.
I'm sure it was.
They had Nelly. Nelly was the halftime show last time. This time it was Neo. Look, Neo's got bangers, man. Like, I know they're 15 years old.
Did he have the fedora on? I didn't see this. Did he have the fedora?
He did. He was very – listen, as a part of the sweating community, I don't want to call him out, but the man was damp.
Oh,
he was.
I can imagine.
He was. So yeah, this was cool going in. Like, winner goes to the playoff, loser doesn't. Like, that's what you want for conference championship weekend. First play of the game, I think Cam Skattebo goes 27 yards or something like that. And you're like, all right, I don't know if I was taking tackle this guy. Turns out they couldn't. He ended up with, I think, over 200 total yards, 3 touchdowns. And he threw a pass away, like a throwaway, to avoid a big loss on a drive that ended up in a touchdown. Nice. This dude is amazing, man. Like, this guy does it all. And he gets awarded a WWE belt on stage as the game MVP afterward from main event Jey Uso and Sami Zayn, for the people who like.
Did you see last night they came back to Tempe, and I forget, there was some event happening in Tempe, but he got off the bus and was throwing up the belt. The belt is great, I gotta say. Yeah, adding the belt is great. I don't know if I'm that excited about next year's Ja Rule Missy Elliott Twista performance at the Big 12 championship game, but the belt is awesome. Dame, you love Cam Skattebo. What did you like most about what you saw from him on Saturday?
Well, you know what? I'm going to go off script here because I'm going to talk about what I didn't like about Cam Skattebo, which his performance, phenomenal. As a player, almost unstoppable. One of the best.
I think I know what you're going to say.
To me, when you come off of one of the biggest wins in program history, and it's a huge moment for your program, for your school, for your head coach, for all the guys. You guys obviously saw the clip with Sam Levitt celebrating with his family. This is a huge monumental thing for this program. This is a program shifter, if you will. To sit in the press conference afterwards and just campaign yourself for the Heisman.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I'm young, but I'm old school because it's all about the team, right? If you want to talk about how underrated you are as a back, you can do that, but you can also talk about how underrated all of your team is, your quarterbacks, your running backs, your guys up front, But to sit there and take, a big moment for everybody and kind of shrink the vision to just about Cam Skattebo, I really wish he hadn't done that. And it's not because I think he's a bad player. I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he's a phenomenal guy. I think he's one of the guys that maybe the guy that has shifted the culture at ASU. But to me, that doesn't resonate with how I played the game, how, just that old school way. I mean, it's all about the team. It's all about the team. And you can glorify yourself. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, so let me give some full context on it, because that was in the press conference. And I asked him before he said that. There's like two different Cam Skattebos. There's like the polished up one, and then the real one that comes out sometimes.
Because I only saw the clip where he was talking about himself. So
I asked him. So after the game, he has the belt, and he grabs the Sharpie, and he's asking all his teammates to sign the belt. And I'm watching this. I'm like, I want to ask him about that. Great for the story. And I asked him, I said, why'd you do that? He said, it's because of my teammates. They're the only reason I'm here. My offensive line, they got all the yards for me. I'm only here because my teammates, they're amazing, and I want to support them. I want to shout them out. They're great. Then 2 minutes later, he gets asked about the Heisman pose, and he goes, man, I'm the best running back in the country. I'm standing on that. I'm doing It was like
which first of all, which I know Cam hates when we talk over each other, but I just got to cut in right now and say, you're not Cam Skattebo. I love you.
Yeah, that's part of it too.
You're a great football player, one of the top 2-3 backs in the country. You are not the best running back in America. And quite frankly, this is not a knock, but you don't deserve to go to New York. Yes, you've played well.
That's not true.
I'll vote. I think he's going to be on my ballot. I'll just tell you. I think he's going to be on my ballot.
So here's why. Here's real quick. But that's fair, Damien. That's a fair point, because some people don't. It was really weird to see two completely different Cam Skattebos within a 2 minute part.
Because
but he did shout out his teammates. It's just not the clip that goes around, because that's how the media world works these days. But I will say for Cam Skattebo, he's the first player to have 1,500 rushing yards and 500 receiving yards since Christian McCaffrey in 2015. That is why I think he will get a lot of third place Heisman votes. Will he make it? I don't know, but I think he had a performance that could get him there.
Whatever happened to that McCaffrey guy? I hope he
didn't win the Heisman.
That's true. Speaking of the likely Heisman winner, Boise State and Ashton Jeanty, they get the job done again against UNLV.
Wait, you think Ashton Jeanty is the likely Heisman winner?
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. The actual running. Excuse me.
Okay.
I was going to jump off the porch. I was going to jump off.
Yeah. No, the actual best running back in the country. Excuse me. Thank you, Chris, for catching that. He goes for 32 carries, 209 yards. He is now at 24.97 on the season, 7.3 yards per carry, 29 touchdowns with a receiving touchdown as well. Chris, where did you have Boise in your 134, and what did you make of Boise getting it done against UNLV again?
Yeah, I mean, Boise State, I think a pretty clear top 10 team at this point. They really finished the season strong. They did have a couple of rough weeks in there, but you finish with a blowout of Oregon State, and you're up 21-0 for most of the game against UNLV. And it's another 200-yard performance from Ashton Jeanty. And I love that Boise State, kind of the classic BCS buster, the Hail Mary lateral game and all that stuff, that they were the first group of 5 team to make a New Year's 6 when we went to the playoff. Now they're the first group of 5 team to make the 12 team college football playoff. It feels fitting that Boise State kind of got back to it was kind of a not so great decade for the last 10 years for them. But Ashton Jeanty is great. We know he's going to be right there in New York. We'll see on the Heisman. But also Maddox Madsen, the quarterback, I still really like him, and he played very well in that game. And Boise State not only getting a bye, but getting the 3 seed is kind of crazy. Because remember, all year, everybody just penciled in the group of 5 for that number 12 spot. That's the group of 5 spot. And we had to be like, that's not the official rule, it's just the top 5 conference champions. And for them to end up at 3 is kind of wild, and I think is a great way to kind of educate people on how this playoff bracket works. But Boise is a lot of fun.
I was talking to our colleague Seth Emerson at the SEC last night, and he said, one of the old adages that probably needs to go away from college football is, it's hard to beat a team twice. He said, you look at the SEC championship, there's been 8 rematches, and the team that won the first match is 6-2 in those games. Boise takes care of UNLV in this game too. Damien, what do you make of that idea? And as you're preparing for like a game plan to play a team twice, whether that is, Georgia and Texas or Boise and UNLV, what is how much do you look at the first game, and like how does that work in terms of preparing to play a team that you already played?
Yeah, it's weird because the rule I always live by, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. 2 times you can get away with it, but 3 times is damn near impossible. But
yeah,
it's so interesting because you're essentially correcting the same things, and so you're going into the second matchup with the same exact game plan, and you're just like, well, how can we just do this one thing better? How can we scheme this up better? How can we get this guy in a better matchup if he's one of our X factor guys? How can we scheme up this quarterback just a little bit better? But it's really just a lot of the things that we did in the first game. And I tell you, that kind of bit us in the butt when I was in New England, because we beat Buffalo one time where we ran the ball, I think like 62 out of 64 times. And then we played them again and tried to do the exact same thing. And they figured it out because they were pretty good. They had some pretty good defensive minds. But,
yeah,
those rematches, it's like it can go anybody's way, because especially when the games are close. Whenever I didn't expect the Georgia-Texas game to be as close as it was looking at, the first result. But, when you get familiar with a team, you do get to scheme up some different things and figure out some different ways to attack them. So it's different than other teams because obviously you're playing different people. You have to have a totally different game plan. So at least it can be something that you're familiar with. And then when you go into that rematch, both teams are more confident that they have an upper leg against the other.
Mm-hmm. In the Big Ten, Oregon, that was a crazy game, 45-37. I'm a little disappointed that the champion doesn't get doused in Lucas oil after that game is over.
A big ball of oil, right?
Yeah, it's a missed opportunity. But ultimately, I'm curious if Oregon fans traveled for that, Damien, and what your experience was like for your first championship Saturday from the media perspective.
Yeah, no, I can tell you guys, it was a hell of a time. Like, it was a lot of fun. The setup for our set with CBS was great. We were right next to the fans. We were right next to the Penn State student section. I was chopping it up with them the whole game. Sometimes we were bickering, sometimes we were in agreement, but it was a lot of fun. But Oregon fans, I expected them to travel a little bit more, but it was like 95% Penn State fans. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of that, if you're Oregon, is watching all those people leave at the end of the fourth quarter. Once that last pick by Drew Aller, once he's picked off, then you just see all that 95% of the stadium just start to clear out. So it was definitely interesting to see, the way that Oregon was able to handle essentially a road game. And they played really, really well. Like I said earlier, I think they should be, the most complete team you would favor to win the national championship. When you look at Dylan Gabriel, what he's done, and Tez Johnson. I mean, that Tez Johnson connection, that dude looked like one of the best receivers in the country last night, like hands down. So it was a cool experience. I was glad it was a fun game. In the early stages, it looked like Oregon was probably going to run away with it. And then Penn State obviously came back and made it competitive. But I'll be damned if James Franklin did not just find a way to screw this game up. And I mean, there were so many examples. There was a time they threw a deep ball to Tyler Warren. I think they were down 7, maybe 14. Threw a deep ball to Tyler Warren. It goes incomplete. It's second down. The clock is stopped, and Tyler Warren needs a blow. Well, James Franklin blows one of his timeouts just because he doesn't want to run a play without Tyler Warren on the field. It's like that wasn't good game management. It's just, there were a lot of examples of, all the conversations that we've had about James Franklin, all the pressure that it puts on him. He coaches that way. He coaches like he is under pressure, like his back is absolutely against the wall. And his players play that way. And that's why even when you have every opportunity to upset Oregon in that championship game, you just don't get it done. They just can't do it.
Not to beat a dead horse again, Chris and Damien, but some would say that Texas fans and Oregon fans who elected not to travel for the conference championship games might see that the playoff might mean more to them, and they would rather spend their hard-earned money on going to playoff games than going to conference championship
That was a conversation.
Do you know how far Eugene is from Indianapolis, Indiana?
That's like 15, 20 miles.
When you already know you have a spot guaranteed, it is a weird thing. But as for this game itself, like Penn State, like, I don't know, man. Like, here we are again.
Yeah.
A top 5 game, and you're just short again. You're not like getting run out of the building. James Franklin is 1-14 against top 5 teams. And since 2000, I think the coaches with the worst. Since 2000, I think the AP had this. The worst records against the top 5 were Joe Paterno 0-7 and James Franklin 1-14. So like maybe it's just a Penn State thing. I don't know. Like the idea that Penn State is like the 6th best team in the country is like 100% right. They're no better than that. They're no worse than that. They're just what they are. And so I don't know, like Penn State, you're just going up against this wall time and time and time again, and you're like, you're in the game, but you're not winning the game. And this is totally different because you could run the ball, you could move it in this game. It was a very good and exciting game, but like just so weird. I don't know what it is if you're Penn State, other than you got a pretty good path to the playoff right now. Yeah. You are probably better than those 2 teams you're playing. The path to the semifinals for Penn State is clear, but if you lose to SMU at home,
bad news.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
And hold on. Before we segue, I want to say one more thing, because I know we're pointing a lot of fingers at James Franklin right now. Tyler Warren, where the hell were you last night? Did you leave the hotel?
That's where he was.
Did you not get off the bus? Like, brother, this was his moment to shine. And really, he is the type of player, and he's so versatile. He's so skilled. He can do so many different things. Like, good players sometimes can outplay bad coaching. Sometimes. But when your best player on the field does not show up, I mean, I think about that early drop he had on a go ball deep down the field. And it was just like, after that, he was just a complete non-factor the rest of the game. And obviously, when you have bad coaching, sometimes the onus is just on the players. But then, like I said, when your best player doesn't show up, it's hard.
It seemed like Oregon was going to do everything in their power to take him away. He had a pretty night. I think it was 7 catches for like 80 yards, something like that. By his standards.
Really? Anyway. That is the most surprising thing I've heard all day, because I couldn't, like, just based off memory, I could not tell you that happened. Absolutely.
But I think ultimately they wanted to take him away. And the problem with Penn State is that there's nowhere else to go. Like, Katron Allen had a nice game. Like, there's nowhere else to go in the passing game if you don't have that. The receivers just are not good enough to make some big.
Come on, Kotal Nicky. There's
a reason that Penn State was listed as a possible landing spot for Concepcion out of the portal, the transfer wide receiver. So Oregon, real quick, I do think we need to give Oregon some flowers here. Number 1 team in the country, only undefeated team in the country, number 1 in the seeding, the rankings, number 1 in my 134. To go 13-0 is really hard to do. And we saw that because nobody else in the country could do it. Damien's done that before. Like, he knows how difficult that is. And so
I never did that. I never went 13-0.
You never went undefeated in the regular season? Well, there you go. That just goes to show how difficult it is. So Oregon, like, we wondered coming into this game, like, how good are they really? They haven't played many big games. How much can we trust them? But in the big games, they have been fantastic. Dylan Gabriel's numbers, I don't have them in front of me. His game against Ohio State, his game against Michigan, his game against Penn State, the 3 best defenses he played, lights out. He's unbelievable, and he may get an invitation to the Heisman ceremony because of that. But Oregon, clear number 1 going into the bracket. I think they're the Vegas favorite to win it. They may not win it, but they're a really, really good program. And I think that first year in the Big Ten to do that, all that travel, absolutely hats off.
Not only are they undefeated, no other team that played on Championship Saturday has fewer than 2 losses. Kind of amazing. Chris, what did that mean for Oregon in the Athletic 134? How far ahead of everybody else are they?
Well, Oregon moved from number 1 to number 1.
Can they be number 0.5 or something like that?
It's really hard to do. They weirdly, again, have probably the toughest path in the bracket, but that's just kind of how this playoff is going to go right now. But very, very good team.
In the ACC, Clemson on fire early. The second half put the thing in neutral. Did not go well, but they do enough late. Nolan Hauser drills that's a true freshman, by the way, drills a 56-yarder to beat SMU, put Clemson into the playoffs. SMU hangs on. They're also in the playoff. The ACC does get 2 teams. We'll talk about the game in a second, but I think, to me, I know people get annoyed with Dabo. I get that. I know that. I understand that. He's done a lot that I think is worthy of criticism. A lot of, obviously, is Clemson maximizing their potential with the way they handle the portal and talking about, I'm going to I'm going to quit if I have to pay players or whatever. He did say after the game, I believe the kicker or somebody came up to Dabo after the game. I saw a tweet about it saying that the kicker's rev share number just went up. But but to me, the thing that I took away from it is like Dabo seems to coach and operate with so much joy. Like when they made that kick, the goofy smile on his face,
there's no Candyland.
There's no PR to that. Like he was so happy, and it was clear he was happy. And after the game, he's shouting out Fran Brown. He's loving on everybody. I enjoyed watching victorious Dabo, a team that I'm not sure anybody that has had more dirt thrown on them this year than Clemson. And that's not to say they haven't deserved it. That was the first real team that they've beaten. But I really enjoyed the end of that Clemson game because they're just they're so the way they operate is entertaining.
That game was awesome. SMU, so many nerves early, you could tell. The turnovers, I think they had 5 drops in this game. They had 6 all season. But when they weren't killing themselves, when they weren't imploding, they were moving the ball, and the defense really clamped down after that first quarter. They really kind of got it going. You could see this is a good team if they can just get out of their own way and they can get into the playoff. And to come back down 17 points in the fourth quarter and to tie it up with 20 seconds left was really cool. And then hit a 56-yard field goal after all the kicking problems they've had this year. They had 3 kicks blocked in a row at one point. They were missing a bunch. That's why they lost the game at Louisville partly. Clemson, the first 3-loss team to make the playoff. Little old Clemson, the team that nobody thought should even be here, ends up being a bid thief, was really cool. Also, Sean McDonough was incredible calling this game for ESPN.
Yeah,
those last couple of minutes. He's one of the best to do it. SMU got away with it. If they don't make that comeback in the second half, I don't think they're in the playoff.
If they lose by double digits, I think they're out. I 100% think. I remember it was 24-7 when I left the stadium last night, and I was like, they better get this to single digits. So getting to overtime, I don't think it was that close. I mean, you look at it, they did grab the 11 seed. Clemson was still a spot, so it doesn't sound like it was, incredibly close. I was kind of surprised that they still were above Clemson. Damien, did it hurt your soul at all watching Clemson celebrate?
Nah, because remember, me and Dabo are boys now.
Oh, I forgot about that. You guys made up.
Cool.
That's good. Did you shoot him a text after the game? Dabo, love you, buddy.
Well, listen, honestly, I thought that them winning was going to shoot Alabama to the playoffs. So I was extra happy with Dabo. But, I think that you hit the nail on the head. Dabo, as much dirt gets thrown on his name for the way he carries himself sometimes, the way that he operates his vision, whatever, the joy that he has coaching this university and these players, I can tell he really cares for that program, for every kid that comes through. He talked about that when he came on CBS with us. So as much as, I've had my battles with Clemson, I don't really have any skin against SMU. So they were kind of whatever on them. But to see Dabo get in and, have that smile back, as much as I hated playing against it, it was good to see it back on his face.
Well, listen, Clemson, this was kind of a sort of a nightmare season with a great ending. But above all, you've won over Damien Harris. So listen, that's a big accomplishment to me. ACC championship, winning over Damien. That's on the same level for me. Let's do a little bit of minor wish casting here. The AP poll came out. Let's see what that looked like. Oregon number 1, Georgia number 2, Notre Dame number 3, Texas number 4, Penn State number 5, Ohio State number 6, Tennessee number 7, Boise was at 8, Indiana at 9, Arizona State at 10. Interestingly, AP poll voters, I think this counts as disagreeing with the committee, had Alabama at 11, SMU at 12, Clemson at 13, and then South Carolina at 14, Miami at 15. The playoff field, if the AP poll had fielded it, would look like Oregon, Georgia, Boise, and Arizona State would have still got the byes. Oregon would still be playing the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. We would get Penn State, Indiana for the right to play Georgia. Texas, Alabama, they've clashed a few times. Another intra-conference matchup. By the way, did you notice, Chris? No conference games. No rematches. No rematches
in the first round.
And that 5-6-7, I think you could argue literally any order. Just saying. They don't tweak the seeding though, Chris. They don't do it. Anyway, Texas, Alabama would be the 6-11 game, and Notre Dame, Clemson. I mean, we've seen these games so much. Notre Dame, Clemson played 100 times, it feels like, and they would play for the right to play Arizona State, and SMU would be out of the field. Chris, what did you make of how the AP poll handled the fallout from Championship Saturday that shouldn't be Championship Saturday anymore, even though people are still in denial about it?
Yeah, I think people looked at Alabama being ahead and thinking it could mean something, but it didn't. But doesn't matter now. All that matters is the CFP field, and we're there. And I think we've got Ralph actually ready to go here. And
this is Ralph's
do that
fault.
bracket challenge. I'm curious. I'm curious how that went for you guys. I'm curious to see what the final results are. By the way,
like
our Austin mock
awful.
nailed the final. He nailed every single pick at the end. Our Austin mock did. So, Ralph, it's Ralph's turn now.
Yeah, I'm excited. Ralph Russo. Ralph, how do you feel about the AP poll? This is your fault, right?
Hey. No. We don't do that anymore. I don't get, well, though I did say on Twitter this morning, if people feel the need to yell at somebody, I'm here for that. I want to feel like I'm contributing in some way in terms of allowing people to vent. Yeah, even in the AP poll, though, I think it was a good indicator of where we are with all this, though, right? Because Alabama was ahead of SMU, but by one single point. There are 63 voters, point system 1 through 25. 1 point, that's essentially a tie. That's essentially a tie for whatever place that those teams are. So I imagine it was probably a pretty spirited debate in the committee room as well between SMU and Alabama. But, frankly, the committee sort of signaled where it was going to go earlier this week. Like, I think that's why a lot of us thought last night SMU would get in. I think the Alabama always gets the benefit of the doubt was sort of lingering in a lot of people's heads coming into this morning. But I also think that, I think that they had signaled what they might do, and then they did it.
It was interesting. To me, I felt like it was going to be SMU, but I thought last year putting Florida State in over Bama was way more egregious. If you put Bama in this year, I thought it was defensible. I would have disagreed with it, but it was way more defensible than last year. Last year was ridiculous. The single greatest injustice the committee has ever done in the decade that it's existed. This year, it would have been bad, but I don't think it would have been quite on the same level. And also, I think there's an element of this, Ralph, of we're in the 12-team playoff era. Like, if SMU doesn't get an opportunity to compete for a national championship, if Alabama didn't get an opportunity to play for a national championship, that's fine. The fact that Florida State won all their games and didn't get a chance to compete for a national championship is still, a year later, I'm still, furious about it. It's ridiculous.
That was sort of the whole point about expanding to 12, right? Because think about it it's obviously we're not at 68, but we have these same conversations with the basketball, and it carries us for about, 12 hours that we wrangle over the teams that were on the bubble that didn't get in. And then after a little while, games are getting played and we kind of move on from it. Last year with Florida State, that lingered because it was just felt like so against sport, right? It felt against the essence of competition to do what happened to Florida State, right? Either of these teams, there was also this hey man, beat Oklahoma, scored a touchdown against Oklahoma, right? So it's easy to sort of justify hey, Bama, you had your chance, but and same thing with SMU to a certain degree as well. You could have, I think it would have. Here's where I am on this a little bit. I think I said this on earlier in the week with Stu and Bruce. I'm a little left brain, right brain here. I think the left brain says, hey, the data probably supports Bama as being the better team.
Yes.
But not so much better that the right brain going, man, but it doesn't feel right to do that to SMU. You feel like you're doing SMU dirty. So the data probably supports a little more Alabama, but not to such an extent that my feelings for SMU aren't necessarily justified.
Well, Ralph, your question begs your presence, I should say, begs the question of why we've brought you into the fold. You're back. You're back on Until Saturday. About a month or so ago, we predicted the final CFP field. That was November 4th. before the first rankings even came out, we let our listeners see the first rankings before they put their brackets out. Nearly 1,000 of you decided to play with us to win a 1-year subscription or extension to The Athletic. We will recap our brackets first and commiserate because we were not very good. Some of you beat us, maybe a few of you. And after, we're going to announce the 3 winning brackets. Let's take a look at what we had. I will start with myself. I had 15 points. So among us, I am the victor. I had my top 4 were Oregon and Georgia. I had them correct. And then I had Miami. They let me down. BYU was undefeated at the time. They stumbled down the stretch. Then I had Ohio State and LSU with the 8-9. Notre Dame in the field. Boise in the field as my 5-12. Texas in the field as my 7. It could have been the 7. Penn State in the field. They were my 10, and then Indiana at the 6, 11 at the Tennessee. A lot of teams in the field, some missed seedings there, but I had 15 points. I have one. Damien finished second with 14 points. Okay. He had Oregon. You almost got Colorado. I would have been very intrigued to see that if Colorado had gone up head-to-head with Camp Skattebo yesterday. They did not get in the field. Miami was your another team with a bye. They did not get in the field. And Texas you had as a bye. So you only got one of the byes. That was the difference here. But you had Indiana and Tennessee, both in the field at the 8-9. Georgia and Boise, both in the field at the 5-12. Notre Dame and Penn State, both in the field at the 7-10. And Ohio State in the field. And then LSU as your 11 obviously did not make the field. They really struggled down the stretch. Ralph, you bringing up the rear here. Only 13 points. I will say there was only 2 points that separated first and last. But Ralph, you had Georgia, Kansas State, Ohio State, and Miami as your 4 byes. Georgia, the only team in that group that got a bye. Kansas State not in the field. Miami not in the field. You did much better, obviously, like a lot of us did on the teams that made the field but did not get a bye. Penn State, Tennessee, you're 8-9, both in the field. Oregon, Boise State, both in the field. Notre Dame, Alabama. So really, the committee, is it possible, Ralph, that the committee just didn't want you to win? Because I didn't have Alabama in the field, and you did.
The funny thing is, I remember making fun of you guys for leaving Alabama out.
I believe that's true. Yeah, I didn't like what I'd seen. So anyway, yes, that was interesting. Now, our winners, Henry with 23 points, got 7 teams seeding correctly. He had Oregon at the number 1, Georgia at the number 2, missed 2 of his teams with byes, BYU and Miami. Neither of those teams even made the field. But he had Ohio State, Tennessee, which is a game that is happening, the 8-9 game to play Oregon. He had Texas at the 5 seed. That is correct. Boise State in the field at 12 seed. That was not correct, but Boise's in the field. Notre Dame at the 7 seed. That is a correct seeding. LSU did not make the field. He missed that one. Penn State, correct seed, 6 seed, and Indiana at 11, Indiana in the field. That's a pretty spicy. That is our winner. Congratulations to Henry. And Ben Remus had 22 points. He had Oregon, BYU, Georgia. BYU really let us all down. Miami as well.
I was never fooled.
Yeah, you've been skeptical of Miami all year, or skeptical of BYU all year. And then Georgia and Miami, they had Penn State, Tennessee, Ohio State, Boise, Notre Dame, Indiana. That game is happening, and Texas, SMU. That is 2 feet. Shout out to SMU. I think that's our first person we've had that had SMU in the field. A lot of faith, a lot of faith in the ponies there. And then Justin won a 4-way tiebreaker because of his SEC championship score difference. Was the lowest of the other 20-point scorers. So with 20 points, we had Justin, who had Oregon, BYU, Georgia, and Miami. BYU and Miami, very popular. And then Penn State, Tennessee at the 8-9, Ohio State, Boise at the 5-12, 7-10, Notre Dame, Texas, and 6-11, Indiana, SMU. This is pretty fun. I enjoyed it. Ralph, which first-round matchup are you most excited for?
Gosh, it's got to be Ohio State, Tennessee to me, right? I mean,
I'll be at that one. I'm excited.
Just with everything going on at Ohio State, and like no team needs to get like a first round victory, I think, more than Ohio State, just to settle everybody down in Columbus. Like,
would it though? I don't think it would. I
so,
yelled about this with Ari for all last year because I was like, he's like, Michigan's the only thing that matters. I'm like, so you're a whisker away from a national championship 2 years ago, but it doesn't matter because you lost to Michigan. Yes. Well, okay.
So I was in Columbus for the Michigan game and hung around a couple of extra days to pick through the wreckage. It ain't great there right now. There are some very bad vibes. It's a long answer that I'll try to condense. Like, I don't really think, like, from the standpoint of, like, would they fire him? Like, I think that's being overwrought. Like, that angle is a little overwrought. I do think that it, like, at least brings the temperature down to, let's say, from like 1,000 degrees to more like 500. If they would at least win a first round game, if they go play, Oregon in the Rose Bowl, that's a great game no matter what. Like, it just recalibrates things and gets everybody to, like, again, to settle the blank down, right? If you lose that game, I really do think, like, now, like, you haven't done anything to erase the Michigan thing. A Michigan thing is still right there nagging at you. So it becomes just a lot more like I just so much more tension in Columbus. So, but I do think winning the first game against a good team, like, it's one thing if it was Indiana or SMU, another team that, even the brands, they're all good teams, but like having that big brand from the SEC, I think also gives a little validation to Ohio State fans as well. So I do think it would recalibrate a lot in Columbus.
Our T hits. It'll be interesting. I've never been to a game in Columbus. I'm excited. Damien, I'll give you the last word as we close out. What are you looking forward to most of the first 12-team playoff?
I'm looking forward to that Tennessee Clemson matchup. Wait, no, not Tennessee Clemson. Texas Clemson matchup.
Texas,
Excuse me. Yeah, Texas Clemson.
A lot of orange.
Yeah, well, that brought me to my point because I was going to say it would be so fitting if they were playing in the Orange Bowl somehow, some way, right? But I'm super excited just because, as much as I talk about how me and Dabo Swinney are good friends now, I would just love to see him get beat down by another SEC team. Like, I would love to see it. A home playoff game at DKR. I know McConaughey is going to be the big flag carrier out there. Hopefully there'll be no trash, but I think that'll be a really fun matchup. A team that came into the season in Texas with a lot of high expectation, haven't really met that yet. A team in Clemson who everybody counted them out, and somehow they found their way. They fought, scratched, and clawed their way in. So I think that's a pretty good matchup. I guess we'll see who comes out of the Orange Bowl, the orangest, and who wins.
Yeah, I will say I was on the sidelines in Atlanta yesterday. McConaughey was there. The entire chain crew all wanted a selfie with McConaughey. It was very funny. Thank you guys for listening. We are here. We got 2 weeks of build-up. The portal opens on Monday. There's a lot to talk about. Please consider subscribing to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Overcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave us a review. We want to know your thoughts on our podcast. Today's show, all the shows you've listened to. We publish 3 podcasts a week, but we're going to be doing 4 through the end of the playoff. Our schedule's changing. We talked a little bit about that earlier. And check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/UntilSaturday and call the Until Saturday phone line and leave us a voicemail on our Monday reaction show. We love doing that, and we love hearing from you guys. That's 316-462-9852. And you can check out the Until Saturday newsletter to get a taste of everything that our college football team does at The Athletic. Jenna Bardall does that for us. She does a tremendous job with it. And best of all, for you, it is free. You can find the links to the newsletter, our YouTube channel, everything that we talked about today in the show's description. For Damien Harris, Ralph Russo, Chris Vannini, and I am David Ubben. We will talk to you guys on Tuesday. And remember, even if you're not in the playoff, bring back the turnover chain. We'll see you on Tuesday.